Welcome to the Going North podcast, where we will deliver you tips and techniques to advance yourself and anything you decide to do in life. I am your host, Brightmon, and every Thursday I will interview authors, especially self-published ones from various walks of life, who will deliver you information and inspiration to help you charge forward. On a quick side note, be sure to check out my book, Going North, on Amazon.com. It's available on ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, this is going to be the leadership edition. And our guest right here is a great leader himself, because he is not only a John Maxwell certified coach, he has also spent some time on the police force in Harford County, and he's also another veteran from the United States Service, I believe the Air Force, right?
Yes, sir.
All righty, cool. The brain's still working. And he's also the co-owner of Team CNE with his wonderful wife, Emily. He is the wonderful Chris Jordan. That's right. And he's also going to be Bel Air Commissioner very soon. Just going to put that out into the world right there.
Yeah, that's a huge, big step. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, going ahead, besides the short introduction, why don't you go ahead and fill in some of the gaps of the cavities left behind with the intro?
All right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I just want to say thank you very much for the introduction. I mean, you pretty much nailed all the major points there. I am a United States Air Force vet. I resigned from the Sheriff's Office last year to go ahead and go full-time with my wife into a ministry-related activity, which kind of turned into the business that you identified as Team CNE LLC. And what we are is just executive leadership and life coaching firm. We're certified leadership speakers, trainers, and coaches through John Maxwell. And so that's just an amazing thing in and of itself. It's really kind of brought all the history kind of to a point and really opened up our future. I guess leadership has kind of been my call for quite a long time. I really was on my own at a very early age and learned how to have to make some tough choices in tough situations sometimes. And through that process, I learned kind of how to lead myself, if you will, but it wasn't necessarily how to do team stuff. And so going into the military and working with the police and having a lot of the experiences I had really developed the team side of it. And so here I am coming full circle into, like you mentioned, I'm running for a political office, which I never ever thought I would ever do. And it actually fell in the last minute as it was. But I think you can agree, and a lot of people that I've talked to agree, that we just need a different perspective on those kind of positions, that what it means to be a servant leader, what it means to develop a team and to work together, affect positive change, or even impact something positively, whatever that may be, even if it's not necessarily changing, but maybe altering a perspective or an attitude towards something. So, yeah, I guess that would probably be a short story wrapped up there of everything.
Said some great things there, especially with the whole servant leadership piece, and also learning leadership of self, which is important, but also forgetting the team piece. So what draws did you have to overcome and learn the difference between first leading yourself and then leading a team?
Well, I think when I first started, I didn't recognize what I was really getting over, but looking back, I guess what I had to get over was some of those external influences. I grew up in a very hostile environment, as some of us, I'm sure, are full aware of or have experienced ourselves, where you're told you're worthless and you'll never amount to much, and you're dumb, you're stupid. Those are the nice words that I will use because of the podcast. But I mean, you get the idea. I lived in a very, very negative environment, And so one of the first obstacles I had to get over was those external influences. And sometimes that inner voice may not be loud enough to drown that out. And so what I can't honestly tell you what really drove me, but I ended up really going to the library, reading a lot of books, really kind of stepping out on my own. I just made a decision at some point that I had to take care of myself. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know, what foundation I was coming from other than maybe my grandparents, being a strong foundation early on. But something within my experience of life drove me to drown out the negative and focus on something positive, even if it was just sitting in a library for 8 hours a day, reading every book I can get a hold of. And it wasn't just leadership books. I mean, it was everything from, history and biography to fantasy to, nonfiction to, you name the book. I was grabbing it and reading it and just filling my head with as much as possible. And I think ultimately that's what kind of drove me into really leading myself, because through books, I think we all can imagine that time where we read one of those books where it really just put us in that book, right? Where we really got to feel like that main character is who we are, or we were really playing a part, and your imagination and things kind of tie into it. And then you close that book and there's a reality that surrounds you, but you want that moment that you had while reading that book to kind of be real, if that makes sense. And so you start integrating what you hear, what you read, what you see, and you say, well, why couldn't I be bold, or why can't I do that? It's not like, you read these, fantasy book about teleporting to another, planet. Obviously that's not, but what within there, I was pulling, pieces out of saying, okay, well, this guy was making a choice though. I think I recognized 12, 13, 14, 16 years old when this process was happening, that it was about choice. I can choose to agree with the negativity, or I can choose to fight my way out of that, whatever that looked like. And I made a choice early on to fight my way out. So that was the biggest obstacle then, as far as leading myself, was just the external stuff. And then once you start leading yourself and you get away from that, the biggest obstacle really is yourself. You start, reflecting, or you start seeing things, or other people and where they're at. And, I think you can agree that when you start comparing yourself and your, walk or your journey or whatever with anybody else, you get discouraged. You get sidetracked because your focus is no longer on where you're going, but it's on what they did and why you're not in that position, or, stuff like that. And so a lot of it just becomes, how do I get over my own self-limiting beliefs, whether that came from a negative lifestyle that maybe is trying to filter back in, or something else, doesn't matter. But bottom line is, I was my biggest obstacle until joining the military, and I had a few breakthroughs with that, where stepping out and being bold was actually rewarded, and there's some success in leading a team and leading some change and culturally and stuff like that. And then once I got to a point of leading myself, even though it's still a process and you're never at that pinnacle point of, oh my gosh, look at me, I'm just the greatest leader of myself. I'm still doing it today. I think it's the realization that there's more. And how do you develop a team? Because you look around and, looking around and comparing yourself is completely different than looking around and saying, well, how are they doing that? And how can I integrate or implement that into what I'm doing to get me where I need to go? Not that I'm comparing myself or anything, but when you surround yourself with a group of people that uplift you, encourage you, and empower you, then obviously you're going to grow. And that's different than surrounding yourself with those that compare to everybody else, and you guys just sit there and kind of wallow in it. And so I realized very quickly too that, again, it goes back to choice. Who am I surrounding myself with, and what are they speaking into my life? And so as the team development side came around, I started to realize that not only do I need to lead myself well, but that's going to affect any team development that I'm involved in, or as a coach and a trainer now, helping others to kind of evolve into. And so the biggest obstacle with team development for me was shifting into the realization that people are going to look at what you're doing, and they're going to emulate you for good or for worse. So making sure that, you're at the high standard you set for yourself at all times is kind of the probably struggle today more than anything.
Yeah, it can be a struggle today because a lot of stuff is going on, and some folks may see the leadership on TV and then they get scared or angry or frustrated, and then folks forget to look at themselves. And you actually said something very true and very powerful, is the fact that sometimes we're our own worst enemies. We get in our own ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's also great that you mentioned how the library was actually a catalyst for you to get out there and just become better at just being the best Chris that you can be, because it's always great just hearing certain stories. I believe it was Og Mandino, the guy who wrote the book called The Greatest Salesman in the World. He originally was a drunkard at one point, and he was about to commit suicide. But then, right before he was about to commit suicide, he thought he would take a trip into the local library, and he picked up a book. I think it was Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, or one of those self-help books, one of the classics. And it changed his life forever, and he ended up becoming one of the best-selling self-help authors ever.
Wow.
Yep, so that's
it's amazing.
It's amazing, and it's a testament to what lies in your local library, y'all.
Yeah, I saw something, I can't remember if it was Facebook or where I saw it, but people are saying a physical book is becoming obsolete, and people are fighting that. They're like, no, we need to keep the physical book very alive and active, because, a library is, man, you hit it right on the head, catalyst for any change you want. Put yourself in that place, where you just kind of get away from the world and you find a quiet place and you open up the book and just allow that to engage the creative and imaginative parts of your mind and just go with it, and just allow those connections to be made. And it's so powerful, especially when you talk about dreaming, not dreaming in the sense of I'm going to sleep and dream, but having dreams and goals and stuff. You know what I mean? Where it was like, when I grow up, I want to be, or, I have this dream to do this, or, those kind of things actually grow and evolve through reading, through opening up a book and communicating with others and talking about that. I mean, that's how that grows, not through just sitting there doing, I don't know what else you would do, but, reading is important. I think that a lot of people would say, well, there's Kindle and you can do everything online and all that. And like I said, that's great, but there's something about turning a page for me that there's a tactile, there's that kinesthetic part to it that really adds so much more value to that time spent with that book than the electronic version of it. So that's just me. But
it's fully understandable, especially the tactile piece. It kind of goes back to, I guess in the way of self-leadership, you're finding out what you're good at, what you're best at, and seeing how you can be the most effective before actually trying to lead others, just having that self-leadership piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if someone wanted to become a leadership coach, what advice would you give to them?
Wow. Well, I think the first thing would probably be why. Why do you want to be a leadership coach? I think you've got to answer that question for yourself before you could ever really understand what it means to be one. That would be my first question, would be, why do you want to do this? And then depending on what the answer was, obviously we can, delve into that. But for me, it was the question of, why do you want to be a leadership coach? Well, my strengths are in encouragement and empowerment. And part of that is I love to watch people realize that unlimited potential that's within them, even if they don't see it yet. For me, to encourage them to open up that part of their life and then empower them to start walking in that potential, that to me is just what it's all about. And I realized that before I even realized leadership coaching is what I was going to do, I realized that I loved that. I loved being able to help people get to that level, to add value to them in that way. And so when the leadership coaching kind of came into my sphere, it just was a no-brainer for me at that point because I already knew my why. I already knew that was just going to benefit me to be certified with John Maxwell, and I just knew it would just help me to broaden my sphere of influence, if you will, to be able to add value to more people than just those that I maybe come in contact with throughout a day. So, that would be my first question, why, and then just kind of go from there. What are your experiences? What do you hope to accomplish? All those kinds of questions that would come from that answer of why do we even want to do this to begin with?
Yeah, that's very important, just knowing your why. Like, why are you doing this? It's just...
Yeah, a lot of people I feel do stuff, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with doing something, but a lot of people are doing good things, but they're not doing great things. And we weren't created to just do good. We were created to do the best, and that requires us knowing who we are. That whole self-leadership thing, knowing our strengths, knowing what it is we're called to do. It took me a while to understand that I'm an encourager and empower. Those are my strengths. And if I operate in those strengths, that's when those great things happen. But if I take on a lot of things that are quote unquote good, like there's nothing wrong with it per se, one way or the other, but it's kind of detracting from my strength, I realize that I'm not operating at that best level that I need to be. And so it's kind of a gut check sometimes where you got to understand it's okay to say no to certain things, but knowing your why is absolutely key to that, whether you're going to become a leadership coach or a life coach or a spiritual coach or a wellness coach or do whatever it is that you want to do. Know your why before you even step into it. And sometimes you'd be surprised your why and what you thought you were going to do may not line up. But if you follow your why, where your strengths and kind of your beliefs line up, you'll see the best begin to happen in that avenue in your life.
Yeah, that's very important. It's kind of like how you start on a journey and expect to go one way, but then the journey evolves into another direction.
Yeah. I mean, how about you, Dom? Did you expect to write a book at, your young age and to be able to, be a part of Toastmasters and running all over, Maryland, going out to clubs? I mean, I don't know if that was on your to-do list when you were, 18 years old. I have no idea. You'd have to tell me, but.
No. No. Nope, it did not start that way for me. I thought I was just going to go in, join Toastmasters, network with a couple people, learn how to conduct a public speaking seminar successfully for my church, and then just go about my merry way, but just ended up just staying with Toastmasters and gaining more friendships and close relationships, and even just going on that path to lead me to actually write and publish my first book. That was basically the evolution of everything. It's like you just came in for one reason, but then you just somehow miraculously just step on a gold rock, and then out of nowhere, it's almost like a gold rush. I'm not really going to California per se, but it just ended up like, hey, more opportunity, get to help out more people, get to learn more about myself, and basically take that experience to a new level, and just going out there and just learning. It's just an amazing thing what can happen when you just take that one step forward. Yeah,
intentionality is huge. So I'm going to turn this, and one thing you said is, learn about yourself. So what is one major thing you learned about yourself, maybe over the last, year or two that you've been doing this, that you'd love to share?
One major thing I've learned is that you always have to make time. You have to set aside time to make sure you take care of yourself as well. Because with all the running around I was doing all over the state, even parts of Delaware and Virginia, it was getting tiring after a while. I was kind of going gung-ho, running hard, running fast, trying to almost do it all, and then neglecting my health in the process. I mean, let's believe it was around 2 years ago, I was about a good 180 pounds, and then dedicating more time into the Toastmasters, the speaking, the book tour and everything, gained a good 50 pounds and got to 230.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like one day you go to put on a pair of pants, and then you don't have as much movement. You don't have as much freedom. It's like, oh darn.
I no longer need this belt.
Exactly. So I was like, yeah, I gotta make sure that what got me to this point, I make sure that I do the good things that actually got me here, that if I want to stay here at this level, I gotta make sure that I still make time to take care of myself, because I used to always try to go to, because I used to usually work out the CrossFit box, CrossFit Catonsville, and the instructor's also has a martial arts background, so he does a kickboxing class. You just go to that and do CrossFit doubles, usually 2 and 3 times a week. And sometimes I'll be lucky if I even make it 1 day a week. And just the signs were telling after a good few months or so. It's like, hey, you can't rely on your past energy to get you through, and you can't eat the same amount of food you would when you work out if you don't work out, because it'll catch up to you.
I love how you said you can't rely on your past energy. Wow, that's powerful there. I think you need to quote that out there, and that's a great statement right there, because too many of us do exactly what you said, is we're pulling from what did work, right? And we're in a totally different place now, and we've got to recognize that in order to continue pouring out, we've got to be filled up, and that requires taking care of ourselves. So that was powerful. Thank you. That was great.
Oh, you're welcome.
Can't rely on past energy. Well, one thing I would love to touch on is kind of what you talked about, and I guess you and I both are kind of talking about it, the whole intentionality about, making a choice and then stepping purposefully in that direction. And so you kind of talked about, and then we can spin this around too, as I know we're kind of going back and forth, but I would love to hear, because like you said, you weren't expecting to kind of do what you were doing. What did it look like for you coming to where you are now with that realization to be more intentional in choices you're making and in, directions you're going from the lessons learned, and maybe just kind of going with the flow, if you will?
Yes, intentionality. Yeah, for folks at home, Intentional Living by John Maxwell, great book. I don't get any commissions for this, so don't worry. Just pick up the book, go to your local library, read it. If you love it, buy 2 copies. But yeah, the power of intentionality, it's something that kind of also goes with the whole action piece and knowing your why. It's like, why am I doing this? And once you're in the doing phase, it's always reminding yourself why you joined in the first place, why you joined this group, why are you taking the steps to do this. Personally, for me, the book itself, it really just started on a dare. It was some coming to the fact that I work at a library and I've read hundreds and hundreds of books, and I recommended them to others. And this one lady I handed this list of books to, she asked me where my book was, and I didn't think about that because one, at the time I was a good 23, and English was my worst subject in high school. So why the heck am I going to write a book when I almost didn't graduate high school because my English grades were so darn terrible? Right. But then after some soul searching, I realized, hey, this is actually part of my future goals of one day publishing over a dozen books and getting them out there to the people to help them out as a result of some of my life lessons that I've learned in the short amount of time I've been on the planet thus far, and also from reading and learning from others. Because one thing is for sure, everyone's not going to have the same experience as you have, so it's always good to go out and see what other people have learned, especially from the Bible itself. Because people knock the Bible these days, especially with so much information available to you. And people forget that the Bible is still a great resource to go from, because, of course, there's the book of Proverbs where it speaks of wisdom, and then there's also the story of David as well when he was fighting Saul. It kind of goes and coincides with the book 48 Laws of Power. And one of the 48 laws is to never outshine the master. In David's case, it kind of was out of his control because he was Saul's top soldier, and he was going out there fighting and killing tens of thousands while Saul was killing thousands. And David was getting lots and lots of noise, some positive noise from the people, and Saul was getting jealous of that. it kind of coincides with the life lesson like, hey, be careful of when you take action and how you shine to people. I mean, the people who may give you attention, that's going to come regardless, but you have to be careful of how you address that, because Saul was getting jealous, and David had to deal with Saul coming at him countless times trying to kill him. And then when David finally had him cornered, he decided to let him go. And it also shows about forgiveness as well. So the Bible is still very relevant in today's society, and it kind of goes back to the intentionality thing of just going out there and learning what can I do to better myself? How can I make myself better person by this time next year? What thing I can do? What knowledge can I go out and seek and find? It's always important to always better yourself, and not only better yourself, but also to encourage others in the process, because like that, you're an encourager as well, because people need encouragement every day. I believe it was in John Maxwell's book, Encouragement Changes Everything, where one part it mentions the question, how do you know if someone needs encouragement? And the answer is if they're living and breathing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love it. I think you nailed it with, obviously I'm a big Bible guy. I mean, I do a video every morning on verse of the day, and I incorporate leadership into that and everything like that. But I think ultimately, I always go back to Revelations when I talk about, okay, so what I'm going to be intentional about sharing my story, because one, before I ever really got into the Bible, I think we intrinsically kind of know these things. But in Revelation, it talks about a clear testimony of Jesus being a spirit of prophecy. And all that means, it sounds crazy for anybody who's, not, kind of aware of those verses and knowledge of it. It basically means that testimony actually is translated to do it again. And prophecy is just basically an invitation. And so when you speak your story over, out or over somebody's life or over a group of people, basically you're just asking for your story to be done again in somebody else's life through the invitation that you're giving them and sharing that story. So it's up to the other people. I think that's why books are so inspirational, and hearing people speak, motivationally is so inspirational, because there is that spiritual side that comes in and says, hey, to that person sitting in the audience, this is about you, or you can do this too. And there's a power in our intentionality will translate into strengthening others to take intentional steps as well. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome indeed. So this is goes back to almost like a time traveling question. So if you were, say this was like 3 years ago and currently in 25, you were 2017, what advice would you give to yourself?
Well, 25 was a while ago. My birthdays now are 20. I am 25 plus, no matter what year it is. So that being said, going back to when I was 25, knowing what I do now, and man, I can tell you, I don't regret anything, because I know that things happen and it kind of puts you in a position where you are now, and I understand that. But if I were to go back, I would absolutely tell my younger self that I need to focus on something other than myself, because I was in a very destructive, self-destructive, self world. It was all about me. It didn't matter around me what was going on or who I was hurting or wasn't hurting, or it wasn't about them. It was about me. And I know that, this is a prevalent kind of theme in the world, probably why this matters. But if I was going to go back and tell a 25-year-old anything, it would be that. It would be, look outside yourself and be a person who does exactly what we talked about, encourages others, who's able to change somebody's perspective on what this life has to offer just by you being a positive example of that. So yeah, I think I would go back and I would say, look outside and stop being so self-destructive, and do for others what you would want in your life, right? The golden rule, do unto others as you would have done to yourself. And one thing that Zig Ziglar says that it's powerful. You help others get what they want, they're going to help you get what you want. Back then, I didn't realize that. And it may have been the whole meeting myself, going through some hard times in the survival mode, and that's all I knew. And it was a transition. My transition into the team thing probably didn't happen for another 5 or 6 years, even beyond that point, if I were to look back. But to be able to start back then, knowing some of the opportunities I've had, that would have changed the game pretty drastically for me, and my trajectory would be completely different. So yeah, I would think refocus outside versus inside is probably what I would tell the younger version of myself.
Awesome indeed.
Yeah. And a lot of people will hear that and say, well, that's kind of doing something to get something. I mean, that's not right. And it's not about that. It's, you got to obviously check your motive. But if you intentionally and authentically help somebody, one of the things that we say all the time is just go to somebody and say, I am making myself available to help you, whatever that looks like. What can I do for you? And they're like, what's the catch? There is no catch. I honestly want to help you. I believe that I can help you. And I just want to give my time, give myself to you, to help you get what it is that you're trying to get. And it changes people when you honestly go into it without any strings attached, and you walk away and you're excited. Like I said, I'm so excited to see other people succeed. So for me, when I see that, like, that's awesome. But the natural thing that occurs is then they want to help you. They want to give back because that's just natural. It has nothing to do with me saying, okay, Dom, I'm going to help you, get this done. I'm going to get and in the back of the mind, I'm thinking, what can Dom do for me? If I'm going at it that way to begin with, one, you're either going to see that, or two, I'm not going to give you 100% of myself to begin with. And it's not really going to be the best that it could be. Right? So if I give you the best of me 100% without any ulterior motives, you're going to reap the benefit of that. And your natural inclination then is to say, well, you helped me. How can I help you? And that's the motive. That's the spirit behind that saying.
Definitely. Just always checking your motives. I think it was J.P. Morgan who mentioned how, I think it was a quote, like, men have two reasons for doing things: the good reason and then the real reason.
Right. That's a good one. Yeah.
So always check your motives.
Yeah, and people see through the motives, man. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say, hey, can I help you? And you're just like, no, I'm good, thanks. Because there's a string attached. There's something else. Like, you almost want to say, yeah, you can help me. What do you want? And you don't want to have to go at it that way. You don't want to deal with that. So, there's been a couple times where I realized that I lived that way, because then when I came to a point of, hey, what can I do for you? Well, what do you want? Nothing. I realized, and this is years and years and years ago, but I realized kind of, wow, this is what people see. This is what they think of me as a person. This is what I'm representing. And you got to start, recognizing that and making some intentional choices to get that change. So.
Yeah, it's true. You just hear the big fat words. It's a trap.
It's a trap. Yeah, the old Star Wars thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So how do you avoid the trap? How do you stay authentic? How do you stay in that place of pure motive? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, it's true. I guess it kind of goes back to knowing your why and keeping that in the forefront of your mind. That's one of the ways I can say it, because I guess you can always travel down the road of your passion, your purpose, and if you forget that purpose and get sidetracked, then that's when desperation could possibly kick in, and just avoiding a state of desperation where you're doing things out of low energy and desperation. So I guess that's one way of seeing it and avoiding that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the other thing too, I think, is going back to what did you talk about? Taking care of yourself and feeding yourself and filling yourself. But what are you filling yourself with too? You got to be intentional. Like you said, you can sit down and watch movies all day and eat pizza and popcorn and gain 30 or 40 pounds and never really progress. Or you can choose to eat healthy and start working out and so whatever you focus on, it gives power. Your focus is power. So if you're focusing on, X, you're going to get X. If you focus on Y, you're going to get Y. And you focus on Z, you're going to get Z. So you got to decide, what of those do you want? And then you drive your focus in that direction. You fill yourself with things that are going to help that. If you want to be a leader, then you surround yourself with leadership books and people who have done that, who have invested in themselves, who are walking that walk, and you stay focused on that. If you want to be a leader and you're going to, go, whatever, you're going to go be on vacation, 6 months out of the year, and the other 6 months you're just going to, do nothing, you're not going to get anywhere. Your focus is completely on yourself and versus what leadership means to me, at least for Chris Jordan, means being a servant leader. It means looking outside of myself. But yeah, I think focus is power. I think what you feed yourself with is important. What are you filling yourself with? Because that's what's going to come out. Who are you surrounding yourself with? What are you doing to intentionally reach that unlimited potential that you have been given? So
Definitely, focus is power. That is powerful indeed. So if folks want to focus more on Chris and follow him and see where they can catch up with all the good stuff you're doing, where can we follow you?
Pretty much anywhere. I have the website, teamcne.com. On Facebook as Chris Jordan and as Team CNE. We are on Twitter. I think it's at CJJordan76 is our Twitter handle. I'm on Instagram, Pinterest, pretty much the same handle all the way across. You can email me, CJJordan76@outlook.com. And at some point, if you do communicate with me, then, I will give you my phone number, and if we're at that level to be able to talk by phone or even text and stuff. I want to make myself as available as possible anytime I can. So, yeah.
Woohoo!
Woo!
All right, Chris.
But Don, I just want to thank you, Don. Before I didn't mean to cut you up there. I just want to make sure I thank you. You're doing amazing work, and having a podcast, getting a book written, leading through Toastmasters and everything that you're doing, including some people may or may not know. Dom is actually speaking at a conference that I'm hosting. And so these are just amazing steps that Dom is being intentional about and growing himself and revealing that to others and making himself available, like this podcast, to really just help others develop and grow. Much earlier time in their lives than me, per se. I started a lot much later, so I love what you're doing because it encourages, especially the younger generation, to really stretch into the truth about who they are and what impact they have in this world. So thank you so much for doing all that.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for being a fabulous guest.
Thanks a bunch for your listening ears on the Going North podcast. I hope you really, really enjoyed that episode. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to share it with your friends and family, especially those who love podcasts and love listening to some inspiration and motivation. And keep a lookout for the sequel to Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, in October 2018. And if you'd like to connect with me directly, feel free to shoot me an email at dombrightmon@gmail.com.